But when we look at the tips on what to look for, if somebody is wondering, am I really a love addict? You want to look at the red flags of feeling empty or incomplete without another person. You jump into relationships very quickly. You struggle to feel excited and connected once you're in a relationship and the initial novelty has faded. You find yourself over and over again settling for less. You get into relationships because of the fear of being alone or being rejected or abandoned. You feel desperate. You'll never find anyone. You get into toxic relationships with addicts. You pick unavailable and love avoidant partners. These are the signs it's time to slow down, do the work on these issues so you can get into more authentic relationships where you don't need someone for all these unhealthy reasons I just mentioned.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Rebel Love podcast. Today, my guest is Sherry Gaba, LCSW, a licensed psychotherapist and certified recovery and transformation coach who's helped hundreds, if not thousands, of people cope with codependency, love addiction, toxic relationships, as well as those struggling with depression, anxiety, trauma, single parenting, and divorce. Welcome, Sherry. Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all the great work you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to have this conversation today. I think love addiction is a real thing, and I want to really learn more about it. So, if you could share a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now before we get started, that'd be great.
Yeah, I started out working in addictions. I was working on the TV show Celebrity Rehab. I worked at a really famous celebrity rehab, and I married an alcoholic. What I noticed, though, is everything I was doing was really towards the alcoholic rather than me, the codependent and love addict. So once I kind of had that realization, I woke up and I decided to really start spreading the word about my own love addiction, my multiple marriages, what causes the addiction, sort of a way to take the shame out of love addiction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you've lived it.
I have lived
Um,
it. Hmm.
mm-hmm. So, just for anyone listening who may not know, what exactly is love addiction?
So most people are really used to hearing about substance abuse, addiction, but love addiction is really a process addiction. It's like a lifestyle addiction. So there are many process addictions like love addiction. You can have a food addiction, you can have a sex addiction, you can have an exercise or internet or gaming or shopping addiction. So we put love addiction in the category of a process addiction. Even you could even call it a soft addiction. And so you're basically addicted to a mood altering activity and behavior, and it actually creates the same euphoric effects that a substance could cause. So the relationship or the romance or having someone, a partner, that is your whole identity. And so when a breakup occurs, there's this withdrawal, just like a heroin addict would have a withdrawal from their heroin. The love addict, really longs for the attachment and all those pleasurable feeling hormones that they had when they were in that relationship, just like the drug user is craving his drug. So it's quite similar. It's just manifests in a different way.
So what happens when somebody breaks up then? Like, I mean, lots of people go through breakups, but how is a love addict's
There's a
breakup different?
withdrawal phase where they're absolutely, sort of out of control. They may be texting, stalking. They can't be alone. There's this chronic emptiness. Thinking a lot of love addicts actually attract toxic relationships. And one of the things we always say, and we'll get into that because I think that's one of our topics today, is when you're in a toxic relationship or you're with someone that's a narcissist, we always recommend no contact for 30 days at least. That's one of the hardest things for a love addict. And then, of course, if you look at the dating age or the digital dating age, that is really, really difficult for a love addict as well because there's so much, there can be so much rejection. It's not really rejection, it's just the way dating is today, swipe right, swipe left. So you're really, as a love addict, you're going to be much more vulnerable to predators, narcissists, addicts, and the like.
That makes sense. So how common is it in the community for people to suffer from love addiction? How
So when you
prevalent is
don't
it?
receive what you need as a child, if you've gone through some kind of abuse, your emotional growth is going to be stunted. If you were neglected or abused, maybe had emotionally unavailable parents, maybe they were addicts, alcoholics, you suddenly are set up for very, very difficult adult relationships because you didn't get what you needed. Um, victims of trauma have sort of a false reality of themselves. They don't even know who they are. They don't know what their emotions are. They're almost sort of invisible. That's because their parents really weren't there for them. So if they've been neglected or abused or had unavailable parenting, there's really no one to acknowledge them. So they learn at an early age that feelings didn't count, what they had to say didn't count, they weren't validated, and so they become very other focused. So they learn that everyone around them, these relationships, are all that really matters, and that's really what they don't have a sense of who they are. So if you don't have an intimate relationship or connection with yourself, it's going to be really difficult to have a true intimate relationship with another partner. All your relationships become very other focused, which is really at the heart of love addiction and codependency. A lot of people, I remember for me, I would say, oh, I was in these relationships with unavailable people. Well, I deliberately picked them on some unconscious level because I was unavailable to me. So I couldn't really handle someone that was really connected to themselves, because that would mean they'd be really connected to me. And that was repulsive to me because it was something I didn't know. And that's why a lot of people go for that, bad boy thing, because it's that person's really unavailable, and that's what this person's really used to.
Mm,
You're looking outside
okay.
yourself to really fix your fear, your pain, your discomfort, and you only think for a love addict it can come from a relationship.
Right, right. And so, what's the difference between love addiction and codependency?
So they both are lifestyle addictions, and they both are focusing on looking outside themselves to fill a real empty void inside of them. That's exactly how I felt when I wasn't in a relationship. And I always felt different. Love addicts are always looking for a person to take away their insatiable need to be loved. And codependents can be addicted to a relationship, but they also can addicted to places and things that give them purpose. They need to feel needed. um, Codependents and love addicts are often terrified of abandonment, and they'll do anything to hold on to to a painful relationship, because the thought of being alone is just too scary for them. Um, Codependents, however, take it to a whole other level. They'll actually control, they'll manipulate the situation, they'll enable the person. I did a lot of that with my alcoholic husband, just to, I was, obsessed with getting him sober. That way he would be available to me and he wouldn't leave me through his alcoholism. And of course, I really never had the control. I thought I did, but I never did. So
Hmm.
for a codependent, nothing is too much trouble. They will give up their whole self for somebody else at any expense. Um, for the person that they're involved with. They're willing to wait and hope and try harder to please, and will take far more than 50% of the responsibilities, the guilt, and the blame when the relationship doesn't work. So codependents often have very low self esteem. You know, deep inside, they actually believe they have to earn their right to be loved. And that's based on that early trauma I was talking about. So when codependents find, when they control other people and situations, they make it they say that they're being helpful, but and it's actually kind of manipulative, because they're not really doing it to be helpful. They're doing it to ward off any sort of abandonment.
Hmm. So, you spoke a little bit about before uh, that these addictions start when we're younger. But if we recognize this, and I'll ask a little bit in a minute what some signs are, but how do we? Is it possible to change, and is it possible to get help, and what does that look like?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, just being on this podcast today, just listening to us have a conversation, it's called awareness. We're being conscious at this very moment to understand what is love addiction or codependency. So we're actually almost making a decision right here and now to change. Um, Part of it is learning to stop looking for external solutions for problems, to really understand that everything starts from the inside out. You really want to look at your fears. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid you're going to be alone forever? Are you afraid no one's going to love you? Are you afraid there's too many women out there, not enough men? I mean, whatever those fears are, really sort of, unlayering them. Um, you want to move out of denial, because often what happens is we know someone's not good for us, but we don't want to be alone. So we pretend that everything's okay. I mean, I think of I did that certainly many times, and my mother did it. She was with a con man after my dad died, and she knew what he was, but she didn't care, because the idea of being alone was just too scary for her.
Hmm.
It's also really important to examine suppressed trauma and childhood issues. So it's really important to work with a therapist, someone that can, a coach is fine, but it's really not going to get to that trauma. I do something called somatic experiencing, which is a technique that I've been certified in to help people unleash that trauma. So really find a really good professional to work with, like myself. And then you want to just be really loving and forgiving. There's a reason that you got into these relationships. It's not, you didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I want to have all these breakups or I want to have all these heartaches." It's not really about that. It's that you learn certain things and now you have to unlearn them. Um, and really just use the pain to grow, learn the pain to prepare for a really healthy relationship. Really start trusting in yourself, which you will be able to trust yourself once you start working on this early childhood stuff. Um, Learn how to let go. Find an online support group that I have a program called Wake Up Recovery. I think it'll be in your show notes. And it's a program, it's a tribe. There's nothing more helpful than being with a tribe of other people that have been through what you've been through. So I invite anyone to check out my link. Um, and, you could join Sex or Love Addict Anonymous meetings. The whole thing is, and that's why I created my tribe, is to know that you're not alone. And that is one of the most healing things you can do to turn things around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine. I mean, I know that with like alcoholism, there's you can go to rehab and you can actually go somewhere. And as you just mentioned, there's some meetings you could go to for this as well. But I don't imagine there's a place you could go because I know I have seen some people actually, and I guess I didn't realize at the time that it was love addiction or any kind of addiction, but going back to someone that they know is just not good for them,
Yeah.
and the relationship's not healthy, right? So it's just like this there's temptation all around.
Well, it is great if they can find a program. I know of one program that people can go to, but it's very, very expensive. And most people don't have the money for something like that. I mean, we're talking $30,000, something to that effect. Could be more,
Mm,
could be a little less. But, if you have that kind of disposable income, yes, it's great because then you get into this isolated place where you can work on these issues, really deal with your trauma. But that's not always an opportunity everybody can take. So that's why finding a great therapist, or, if you can't afford therapy, getting into a group like mine where you're working with a licensed therapist and you're working with other people going through the same thing. You're getting educated, you're learning about what you can do. You can take the skills that you're getting and kind of, apply them to your life. Um, and then when you maybe relapse, like a drug addict might relapse, you may relapse and get into another bad relationship. You always have your tribe to kind of build you up. You have myself, the person leading the group to help uh, get you back on track again.
mhm, mhm. Okay, so we've talked about a few signs, but let's spell it out a little bit more. What are some like clear cut signs that we may have a love addiction and not be aware of it, or not kind of have thought of it in that way?
Well, over adapting to what others want, having no boundaries, always saying yes when you really want to say no, a fear of letting go, being alone, a fear of the unknown, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, attempting to change others, really not accepting the person for who they are, sort of living in a delusion of who you want them to be rather than who they really are, needing someone else to make you feel whole, looking for others for affirmation and for self worth, for validation, like I said earlier, fearing abandonment, fearing rejection, having those withdrawal symptoms, just feeling like you're just going to die without being with that person or being in a relationship. Giving up who you are out of a fear that you might lose someone because they're no longer going to approve of you. I mean, those are definitely telltale signs. Never really being able to be alone, going from relationship to one relationship to the next. Those are definitely signs of love addiction.
And at what degree do we kind of classify it as a love addiction? Because I know a lot of people who kind of like semi fall into that category. How do we know that you know, it's kind of like a, I don't want to say the word normal, but typical way of operation versus much deeper issue or addiction?
Well, I was going to answer this a little bit later, but when we look at the tips on what to look for if somebody is wondering, am I really a love addict? You want to look at the red flags of feeling empty or incomplete without another person. You jump into relationships very quickly. You struggle to feel excited and connected once you're in a relationship and the initial novelty has faded. You find yourself over and over again settling for less. You get into relationships because of the fear of being alone or being rejected or abandoned. You feel
Mm.
desperate. You'll never find anyone. You get into toxic relationships, relationships with addicts. You pick unavailable and love avoidant partners. So these are the signs it's time to slow down, do the work on these issues so you can get into more authentic relationships where you don't need someone for all these unhealthy reasons I just mentioned. And when you do that, if you don't do that, you're going to end up settling for less and going from one relationship to the next and losing parts of yourself and I mean the bottom line is you have to give yourself time to heal and do the work. A lot of
Mhm,
times
mhm.
people aren't willing to do that. They have to be in a relationship. So, if you're going from one to the next, there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that'd be really hard for someone in this situation to be
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I have a question about that. How long? I know this is probably not a practical question, but how long does it take? Like once we start this process of working on ourselves and being part of the support group and putting in the work with the therapist, how long? I know there's, how long is a piece of string? Really, that question. But what can we expect?
Yeah, I don't really
After.
have a cookie cutter answer. I know like in 12-step programs, if you're in AA, don't drink, it's basically abstinence. You can't really do that with a love addiction because you do want to find love, you want to be in relationships. So I can just say this. When you start really feeling connected to yourself, when you feel like you can be alone, you don't have to be in a relationship to feel whole. I know for me, I had to spend a few years really getting to know myself. I took up some hobbies like outrigger canoeing. Um, I didn't date. I just, wanted to be in a place where I knew that no matter what, whether I was with someone or not with somebody, I was going to be happy. In fact, I'm in a new relationship, and just before I met him, or even actually not even just before, maybe a few months before I met him, I had told myself, I may be alone the rest of my life, and you know what? That's okay. I'm getting older; it's a little bit harder to meet people. What turns out is I met someone 5 years younger, so it was all just a story in my head. But once I actually let go of this need to have somebody, I actually found somebody.
Mm,
And it wasn't like I was ruling it out. I just really had happiness with my life. I felt like my life was full. I have my daughter, my grandchildren, my dogs, my work, my canoeing. And so once I could let go of this insatiable need to be filled up in a relationship or a romance, I was able to find real love.
hmm. Yeah, that's a really. I really like. Thank you for telling that story.
No,
I
it's
feel like.
it's really true. I mean, I really, really let go of the illusion. I mean, look, I'm not spring chicken. If you're someone younger in your 30s or you want to get married, you want to have kids, I get it. And that's a really hard thing to say to yourself, oh, well, I'll just be alone forever. But I think it's just the vibration that you want to be in. You just want to be in a high
Mm,
vibration that I really love my life and I welcome the right person. But for the moment, for today, I'm going to be really happy. I'm certainly not suggesting people make a decision at 20 years old or something or 30 or even little older, oh, well, I'll just be alone forever. I'm older. I'm 50 plus. So for me, it was really easy to just say I've had a really full life. It's going to be okay no matter what. So I think it's really, if you're younger, it's really about stay in that high vibration of, my life is really great today and I welcome up whatever comes my way.
I like that. That's really, really great advice.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Um, okay. So actually, we've talked a lot about support. Is there anything else that you have to offer the audience, or any other things that we can mention
Well, I
here?
just wanted to say that, love addicts really are vulnerable to toxic relationships with narcissists or addicts or unavailable partners. So they can be very exhausting and frustrating, and people may feel like they're doomed to stay in these really unhealthy and miserable relationships. And it's really easy for love addicts to get into these relationships because they're repeating this early trauma into their adult relationships, and they just have really low self worth and you know, you just have to be really careful. So rather than relying on the facade of love to fill your emotional voids, you just really need to identify healthier strategies to manage daily feelings of stress. You really have to create healthier boundaries. You really have to increase your self esteem. You really need to process your childhood trauma. And learn some assertiveness skills so that if you find yourself in one of these relationships, you have the communication skills to move through it and move out. And just really being able to recognize, is this a toxic relationship? Because once you're in one of those relationships, they're very hard to get out of. That's why we have
Mm.
that no contact rule. So, if you're a love addict, I highly, highly suggest, like I said earlier, there's lots of support out there. They can work with me, they can join my group, they can go to 12-step meetings. There's lots and lots of great stuff out there. They can get my book, Love Smacked, which is all about moving through love addiction and codependency. There's just a lot of support out there. And, let's take the shame away and let's just grow from the experience and find, healthy relationships.
Awesome. And how do we, when we were looking for someone to help us through this, how do we know that we've found the right person for us? You know how
I
like
think I think
finding
you have
therapists.
to feel a connection. You have to feel like, oh my God, I could relate to that person. I mean, I know that people like working with me because they know I've been there both personally and professionally. They know I've been with an alcoholic. They know that I've had multiple marriages. They know that I've been a love addict. And most people don't judge me for that. They actually go, wow, she's really done the work. That's really awesome. And of course,
Mm.
I'm a professional. I'm licensed. You want to really work with someone who knows their stuff. I mean, I know there's coaches are great. That's fine, but if they're really not going to work, if you really have trauma, you really need to work with someone other than a coach. You need to work with a licensed professional.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff is really important. Just one more question. If we've done this work, if we've done this work, we've gone through all these steps and then we find someone, how do we know, like, obviously we'd be more aware at this stage of doing all this work, but if we run into someone who they have got some issues, like they're codependent or they're a love addict, and we get, how can we see that sooner and
Yeah.
then
Well,
exit sooner?
yeah, I would say it's more likely they're going to run into a narcissist if they are a love addict. But if they're not a love addict and they're healthy and they're listening to this podcast, but they start seeing someone who is very addictive in the way they're dating you. They want to be with you all the time. They're very controlling. Um, they want to, get serious right away. They do this love bombing stuff where, you're the one and you're the only one and I've never felt this way before. You might want to really go, hey, relationships should be really slow and steady and not so intense. But what happens is we love hearing those things, right? We all want to be loved. But I think when it comes at us in a really like I said, a love bombing kind of way, I think you got to really be aware that you're probably dealing with a narcissist. You may even be dealing with a love addict.
Mm, yeah, and then getting caught up in that cycle again.
Exactly.
What about some do you have any dating tips? Because I know you mentioned at the start that in today's dating culture, there's a lot of that just swiping, and it has really changed the quality of conversation. And I mean, I can speak for myself and some other friends that I've spoken to about it. It's just exhausting. Like online dating is just absolutely
It's
exhausting.
exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It only takes one. So don't give up. I know that it's really one of the, I hate to say it's the only way, but as we get older, it is one great option is to do the online dating. But think of it as just one option. Try to still do other things, play tennis, play pickleball, take up hiking, join a meetup. But if you're doing the online dating, remember that it is online dating. Don't take it personal. It's never about you. Usually the
Mm,
problem is with online dating is people can ghost you really easily, which means, kind of disappearing. And the reason they do that is because there's no accountability. Like in the old days when was dating when I was younger, you'd get fixed up with somebody and nobody would ghost you. They would just say, "Hey, we're not a match." But nowadays, because they'd be too embarrassed by the person that fixed the two of you up. So
hmm
nowadays they just ghost you because there's no, like I said, there's no accountability. So don't take it personal. They're just, you know, I always say this: rejection is protection. It's total protection. That means that person was not right for you. I wouldn't spend lots and lots of time talking to these people to nauseum. I'd be like, you want to give them your number. I say be safe, use a phone number that, I don't know, one of these portable phones. I don't know, but I probably wouldn't give too much personal information. Have a conversation. And if you feel there's some kind of connection, meet them. If they still want to talk and talk, and there's no like date planned or meetup planned, I would lose them real fast. I wouldn't waste a lot of time. It's a numbers game. I hate to say it really is a numbers game. It's the law of
mm.
averages. So you kind of have to uh, talk to a few people before you find that right one.
Mm. And what are some green flags that we should be looking for?
Why you would want to be with somebody.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone that is balanced, someone that's healthy, someone that's done the work on themselves. Um, someone that obviously is not abusive, someone who isn't, an addict, someone who's not a serial cheater. I mean, you want to really look at their history. Who are they? How have they lived their life? How do they treat the waitress? Are they a kind person? Are they thoughtful?
Mm.
What are their values? Values is a huge one. The person that I'm with now, I think he's really one of the first guys that we share so many similar values about the way we see things. And unfortunately, today, even the political environment, if somebody is on the opposite end of the political spectrum, that's what ended another relationship I was in. We just could not see eye to eye politically. So I think that is something, unfortunately, we have to add to our toolbox these days, or to our, not toolbox, but to our specifications. Because if you really have different ideas about the way the world works, the way you see things, um, it's going to become a problem. So really look and see, like, do you have shared values? One person liking crime movies, the other person liking love stories is not a deal breaker. That's just a preference. One person likes sports, the other person doesn't like sports. So what? But who you are as a person and how you are in the world is much more important. And also, I was pretty shallow. If you looked really good, you smelled really good, I wanted to be with you. I had to change that storyline. I realized that, what a person looks like, I'm not saying you have to have attraction, of course, there has to be attraction, but you have to really look beyond what they're, having that really great smile or those dimples, or they're tall, or they're this or that. If you have some type, I say lose the type and, really look at who the person is.
Yeah, a friend of mine said I don't know where, I can't remember where she met her husband, but she said if she would have seen him on the date, she would have swiped on a dating app. She would have swiped left because he's shorter than her, and now they're married. And she said he's the most amazing man.
Oh, yeah.
And she said I totally would have missed out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I always went for dark, handsome, whatever. The guy I'm with now is light skinned. He's really tall, which I never really went for tall guys because I'm kind of petite. I mean, he's just not my type that I had in my brain, but
Hmm.
he's fantastic. He's a wonderful human being. He's a wonderful person. So I don't ever miss those other qualities that were sort of shallow, really.
Superficial, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
here's the thing: everyone ages, right? Looks fade. Um,
that's right.
where did you meet him? How did you meet him?
I did meet him on a online dating app. Yep.
And so you, even though he wasn't your type, you just took a chance.
Well, I broadened my age range, because I'm older. I decided, I can go younger or older. I know several people actually that have met their people online that were younger, and it seemed to work out. So I was really open to that. Um,
Mhm.
and he is younger, and who would have thought somebody 5 years younger, but it's not an issue.
Mhm. No,
So I,
it's
I
not an
would say,
issue.
broaden your age range. I think you could even broaden geographic location. I didn't necessarily. He does live in the city. I live in the valley, so we're probably an hour apart when there's traffic. But I mean, that's not a big deal. But even somebody that might have been cross country or another state or another city up north, I mean, I would have been okay with that. Just really, you just never know when love's going to find you. So keep yourself open.
Mhm. Ah, Sherry, this has been so great. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
good.
I know you did mention a couple of times where people can find you, but if you can just mention that again, that'd be great.
Well, it's Wake Up Recovery. I have a shorter link. So, what I'm going to suggest is people really look at your show notes because I don't have it in front of me, to be honest, the link. You could go to Wake Up Recovery, but it takes you to another site. So, I will give you the link. I'll send it to your assistant. You'll have it. It'll be in the show notes. And then I'll also be offering a free ebook on love addiction and narcissistic partners.
Perfect, perfect. And for anyone wondering, you can find all the links mentioned in this episode at rebellove.com/EP38. Sherry, thank you so much again. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Rebel Love podcast, the podcast about love, sex, relationships, and money. If you like this episode, please support us by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. And find all the details of this episode and more at rebellove.com/podcast.